I'm grateful for this opportunity to bring greetings to you during your virtual State of the Symphony discussion. While the COVID-19 pandemic has taken much from us, in some regards, it's given us something extremely important, and that is a renewed and deepened sense of the importance of community. The Arkansas Symphony Orchestra is a part of a vibrant, diverse music scene in our city, and your steadfastness and determination to place a larger emphasis on being a part of this community is crystal clear. You've put your money where your mouth is. Outreach to schools, kid tickets to the symphony, the increased presence of African American composers, guest artists, and guest conductors, as well as having more persons of color as Arkansas Symphony Orchestra musicians. These have allowed more people to be exposed to and experience the symphony. I'm glad to have a neighbor like you. And the city of Little Rock is proud to have our Arkansas Symphony Orchestra as a selling point when we tout the wonderful things about our city. I'm looking forward to greater things to come. Thank you.
I'm grateful for this opportunity. COVID-19 pandemic has taken much from us. In some regards,
Well, hello, and thank you, Mayor Scott, for that message. My name is Geoffrey Robson. I'm the Interim Artistic Director of the Arkansas Symphony Orchestra, and I'm here with Christina Littlejohn, CEO of the ASO, and we're here to talk a bit about the state of the symphony. And it's been a crazy 6 months for all of us, and not just involved with the orchestra. I took pause to reflect a couple days ago that it was exactly 6 months since the first performance that had to be suspended happened, and to think of all that's transpired since then is really stunning to think about. But here we are, and we're in business, and we're thinking about the future. And so we thought we'd just take a bit of time to express our thoughts, share with the community, express our thanks for the incredible support that the community has given us, and from within and from all directions. And I think it's safe to say that the state of affairs looks bright, looking to the future. And so we're going to talk through a bit of the past, a bit of the present, and also looking to the future. So we'd like to invite your questions. Please go ahead and submit them on YouTube, Facebook, or on our website, wherever you're watching this Brown Bag Lunch. And we'll be happy to respond to anything. So nice to see you, Christina.
Good to see you too. And I wanted to echo what you said, and also just make a shout out to our mayor, Frank Scott. That was the first time I'd seen that. That was so thoughtful and moving. And it's just, it's kind of how this virus has been for me. The one thing that's made it positive is that community spirit, and the community supporting us, and our mayor supporting us, and recognizing that we're trying to do what we can to make sure we're serving Little Rock and making our community proud of us. So thank you, Mayor Scott, for that introduction.
Absolutely, and and he shows so grateful for that, and he's been so supportive, and been at our events and spoken on our behalf, and it just really means a lot to feel such a part of the community. So,
right.
But 6 months ago, Christina, when you woke up that morning, Saturday, it was supposed to be the Aretha Franklin tribute concert. I mean, what was going through your mind then?
At that point, I think I was still at that point where it was denial, right? Like, okay, we'll miss this concert, but I'm really super excited about Symphony Fantastique, and how are the ticket sales for that, and how are the ticket sales for Jurassic Park? At least we'll have Jurassic Park. So 6 months ago, I still thought that that things would turn around quicker, but they didn't. And one of the things, it was also a real shock to the system. So I know one of the things that meant a lot to me was the Bedtime with Bach series. And I know starting pretty much from day one, I know exactly where I was at 9 o'clock every night, from that minute that Drew and you created Bedtime with Bach for us. So I want to know what was going through your head when Drew gave you a call.
I mean, it was, amazing to think now, looking back, how Drew's idea that Friday night and that he called me about Saturday morning has, in a way, defined our entire response and approach to the situation and the shutdown and the pandemic and all of that. And he called me Saturday morning and told me what he'd done the previous nights and had recorded himself and named it Bedtime with Bach and that he thought we should maybe try and do this every night. And I immediately, my first thought was like, I was like, I need to think of something to play. And so I was sitting there with the stack of Aretha Franklin scores in front of me that I was no longer going to be conducting. And, picked up my violin and started just recorded a little thing and sent it to Drew. And that played that night. And so thus it continued for 85 straight nights, I believe, through the end of May, when our season officially ended. Every single night, different members of the orchestra recorded short performances and statements, and we were so lucky to be able to post them on Facebook, and it really defined the next month because we started to get attention for it. And I think it's appropriate to shout out to David Gerstein, who was a huge helping hand in making the social media presence known to the community and to our marketing staff, of course, as well. And it wasn't long before we realized we had something special to offer the community and that people were responding, and all of a sudden we were getting national attention and so here we were, and I'm sure you were freaking out about how we were going to stay in business, but all of a sudden there was this almost outpouring of support, wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah, it's true. Yeah, I mean, I was just once it kept going on. For me, the one thing that I could count on, I wasn't sure what in the world was happening around. I wasn't sure where the orchestra was going to go. But the one thing I could count on was every night at 9 o'clock, I could log in my Facebook and watch a musician. And it was just so sweet, too, because it was everybody at their home. And the McBennies went and played together and were outside. And Jacob with that beautiful cello playing. And it was very touching and authentic and inspiring and just what I needed every single night. And and we're thinking about, quickly, once we realized it was going to continue for a while, we had to think about what it was that we stood for, right? So even in this time, how are we going to make decisions? Because I feel like we're making decisions quickly, but sometimes we're making decisions slowly. And I've reached this place where I'm just like, pivot in baby steps. Every decision we make it a baby step in case we need to pull back. But at that time it was, what are the principles that we're going to use when we're making these decisions? And so one was we wanted to make sure that we could employ our musicians and staff. So we are an orchestra. We are here to make sure that Little Rock and the state of Arkansas have professional musicians, great quality musicians. I'm looking at you, Jeff, thinking about Yale graduates and our Eastman graduates, and you guys are just so wonderful. And you all moved to Little Rock to serve this community and to be part of the orchestra. So it was our duty as the Arkansas Symphony to make sure you guys had a salary and health insurance. I didn't want to be, that was at the time when some of those orchestras were just cutting everything. And so we made the decision we were going to stand for that. We were also going to stand for serving the community, that was extremely important, that we made sure that we had a community presence, but it's more than the presence, that we actually truly were serving the community. So I'm so thankful to Catherine Williamson and Joanna. They flipped to education, and all of y'all put your education programs immediately online. So we started Zooming and teaching classes, and those poor teachers, I know they were used to teaching groups, and Catherine, she's so sweet. She's like, well, it was impossible to do it as a group. So I started teaching them all individually. So gosh, a 1 hour service just magically turned to like a 7 hour service for her, but she was happy to do it. And I think about that. And then I also think about, again, the Bedtime with Bach, all of you, just, that was a musician program. The staff, our job was to support it. And that was something else. I had a lot of calls from my colleagues around the country asking how I asked our musicians to do that and how I got our musicians to agree to do that. And I was like, that wasn't me at all. I said that was our concertmaster's idea. And I said, my job was just to recognize a great idea and support it. I said, so Brandon, Kendall, a lot of our staff made sure it was possible to do it and put the infrastructure in place, but that was all the musicians. And you guys volunteered your time and created that artwork yourself, that content yourself, and you wanted to serve the community. It was just this real spirit of making sure we serve the community. Our third point was also to stay in business financially. So that was the part that was kind of also freaking me out, but it was an imperative was to make sure we would survive financially at the end of this too, and be stable and strong then too.
So we had a big, our fiscal year ends on June 30th, and that's a big target date for fundraising. And of course, we've tallied all of our ticket sales for the year, and it's really important for us to finish the fiscal year in the black. And through, of course, we had some government support, which we were grateful for, and both the NEA and directly, from the government. But it really wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been for the success of ASO Giving Day, as well as the generosity of our patrons in donating their tickets for concerts they couldn't go to, which we were incredibly grateful for. And we managed to do that. And once we got there, at the end of June, we took a big deep breath and started thinking about what next, because we know things are probably not going to be back to normal in September, and of course, it was nothing of the sort. So
Right.
that really was kind of a tipping point, right? But we got there, we finished the season in the black, and working on a sustainability fund, knowing that there were certainly going to be tough times ahead. And
Yeah.
then I had been meeting with a group of staff musicians and staff and musicians to start, we call it scenario planning. And we met every week starting in the beginning of May, really just to begin researching, like, what does this really mean? We can't just not, we have to be looking for
Right.
how to get back on the stage as soon as possible, how to do it safely, what
Safely.
that looks like. And so really the next month and a half was just research. You're trying to finish the fiscal year. We're trying to figure out, what's safe to do. And what does all this mean? What does, there's what happens, not to get technical, but, one of the big stories for orchestras is there's so much uncertainty over playing wind instruments and singing and being on stage together. And, the way things are shared is an incredibly difficult kind of scenario to kind of, hash out. So
Yeah.
we did that, and we're continuing to do that. But then by, when was it, mid-July, when we sat down and we were like, okay, we gotta, come up with some ABC plans, right?
Right. Like in May, I asked you guys if you would go ahead and start thinking about the artistic, but I said, David Renfro, who's our principal horn, but also our chief development officer, I said, David and I have to work on raising money so that we can make sure we can afford what happens. And again, I just want to say thank you, because ASO Giving Day was so successful. And part of the reason why we were okay by mid-July, the big reason is our board was extremely generous this year. They made extra gifts. Our past board members made extra gifts. And then we had a lot of gifts from the community, a lot of gifts we got a lot of $100 gifts, more so than we'd ever gotten in any time in the symphony's history. And I think I am truly touched, and I know I probably sound goofy, but I'm truly touched by just the generosity of our community. Like, I really feel like people want to make sure that we're here. And we had donors that gave to the sustainability fund, and I just really feel like Little Rock says, no, we want the symphony to be here when it's over. So because of that, you're right. Then by mid-July, I was like, whew, okay, now we can all think about programming. So what were you thinking about, Jeff, mid-July?
Well, we, we all met, and basically we hashed out 3 kind of categories of plans. And it was a kind of best, middle, and expected case scenario. And you know, we called them A, B, and C, and kind of tried to define them in a way that we could put various activities in those categorizations. And so plan A meant more or less that we were going to have concerts with an orchestra of maybe not full size, but up to 50 people, perhaps 40 or 50 people, in Robinson with some sort of socially distanced audience. And that was our kind of best case scenario. And then plan B was to have much, much smaller orchestras, but still orchestras, say 10 to 20 musicians, socially distanced on stage with many, 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 many backstage protocols that we've been, you know, safety protocols that we've been exhaustively researching. And then scenario C, which was basically no live audiences, many virtual events, small chamber concerts, and hopefully, if the circumstances permitted, outdoor concerts where we could invite some people to come hear us live. And we were satisfied with those categories, and what we decided was that for everyone's safety and that we were going to start the season in that scenario C. So what you're seeing right now in terms of fall programming was the result of that meeting and the scenario C. And that our original idea then was to go to our plan A when we come January, or really come December, with hopefully with the holiday. And as you know, we've really just announced, discussed with our musicians last week, and discussed with our board, and now is open. We've had to adjust our plans again, because flexibility is king in this whole situation. And now we're looking at more of a plan B scenario. So while it seemed probably like we're kind of lurching from idea to idea and coming up with things on the fly, which we very much were coming up and still are coming up with things on the fly. It was really an important meeting that we had, where we kind of, you know, had made some of those decisions, and that gave us a template on which to work. So then, you know, we started planning a fall season, which includes all of our education activities as well. Just to, you know, it's not just our concerts. Our full-time musicians are deeply engaged, as Christina mentioned, in our in teaching in the Sturgis Academy Youth Orchestra. We had to come up with a whole online curriculum for youth orchestras for the fall, which is about to get underway this weekend. Sturgis Academy is online and underway, and we had to find performance opportunities for musicians. So the calendar that you're seeing for September, and I encourage you to go to arkansasymphony.org and look at our fall events, is what came out of that. And actually, we have a question already that's relevant here. Looking forward to hearing of plans of outdoor concerts. How are those plans coming? And so we are expecting to do a small chamber concert outdoors in October 9th. You'll see the October calendar coming out very, very soon. It is a bit month to month right now as we figure out what's all is possible. And we're in the works with potentially hoping to do another one in November as well. So, but wouldn't you, I mean, it's, you know, and the plan is that if the weather's bad, we can put that concert, live stream it from Burn Hall, where we've set up a studio. Because also in that meeting, I think it was Christina's, where, you know, it's like, if we're going to do all this virtual stuff, we have to invest in some equipment.
Right. Yeah. We didn't, I mean, we're not designed to live stream things. That's not what we do. We play live for people. So yeah, we're like, okay, what do we need? And so Brandon checked the pricing for us. And so we said, okay, if we had $10,000, we could transform that rehearsal hall downstairs into a live streaming studio. And so thankfully, one of our board members, Dr. Philip Kinney, and his wife, Jeanette Lee, donated the $10,000 so that we could create that live from Burn Hall studio that we now have. So that was very generous of them. So yeah, it's part of it, like, okay, what resources do we have? And then what resources do we need in order to pull this off? So the Symphony now has probably, I have no idea. We have at least 5 Zoom accounts because the teachers all need their Zoom accounts. And we have that new studio downstairs in our Burn Hall.
Yeah, and you know, on that note, definitely, I mean, if you're watching this, you probably know where it is already, but there's on our website, there's a new virtual performances button where you can watch events that are happening live, as well as archives of all the events that have happened so far. And yeah.
I was going to give a shout out to the ASO Guild too, our Arkansas Symphony Orchestra Guild. I was thinking about resources, and I'm like, well, they had Designer House, which they had to postpone, but then did happen. And for Designer House, they had bought some tents. So actually, we'll have to pay to have the tent set up, but the Guild owns some tents that we can start using for some of these outdoor performances too. So, and thank you to the Guild.
Yeah, absolutely. And we will definitely be using that. So we'll be able to announce the location of those really soon, I promise. It's just, it's amazing the number of T's to cross and just before everything can work just right, so that we can really, focus on making music, but focus on safety. And it's been amazing to witness our planning process kind of, it sounds negative, but I don't mean it this way, but collapse from a situation where you're thinking about concerts that are happening 2 and 3 years from now to thinking about concerts that are happening 2 and 3 weeks from now, and it's, it changes the whole dynamic. And while we understand this is necessarily the way it has to be, it's never our intent. I mean, we've talked many times about how do we get further ahead in our timelines, because that's where the greatest wealth of creative capital is held, when you have that lead time.
Right. And then you have a chance to do more community partnerships. Like if you have the lead time, I know one thing you and I are both excited about is this grant that we got to commission Tawny Leon to write a piece for us. And we're the lead co-commissioner of Tawny Leon, and that piece will be debuted in April of 2022. And so because it's so far out, that's given us a chance to organize the other orchestras that are partners with that. But it also gives us a chance to think about who are the community partners that will also be excited about Tawny Leon. So even though we're currently trying to figure out what we're going to be able to do safely in January, we're also thinking about who might be the best partners for Tawny Leon, who would be interested in her. She's been here before. She wrote the music for an opera based on Little Rock Nine. So with her, there's going to be other community partners, but now we actually have some lead time. That kind of stuff is really hard to pull off at the last minute. Although I will say our musicians have managed to pull off a couple partnerships at the last minute with those Friday night or for the Thursday night happy hours.
Yes. So one of our events that we're doing this fall is, I was trying to think of ways we can partner from a distance with local businesses in this case. So one of the monthly events we're doing this fall is a happy hour with the ASO, where we're doing producing a short live or recorded performance from our little studio downstairs from where you are, and partnering with the local restaurants or business to have a kind of matching cocktail or drink that people can learn about and also make at home and then enjoy the performance. And we had the first one of those just last little more than a week ago, and we'll be doing that again at the beginning of October. So that was neat, and that did come together on pretty short notice. So it is a relief when we are able to still think a little bit long term, because from my standpoint, if we lose sight of the long term, that's going to put us in an extremely difficult situation. Like, we've often thought of this kind of pyramid, right? as well of planning. You know, I guess we like our categories A, B, and C, and you know, and the category A planning projects are the ones that have that 2 and 3 year timeline. That are sort of maybe pie in the sky projects or complex collaborations or outside funding, this sort of thing. Whereas, and then below that you have kind of your standard planning process, which is about a year out or a year to 8 months out. And then at the bottom, we have our chaos planning, which is reacting to the situation on the ground. And, you know, and something I think about a lot as we're trying to propose concerts is like, how do we get out of that? You know, and as long as we still have our hands in some of those longer term projects, it's going to make it a lot easier to get out of where we are. And I think it would be appropriate now and then to you know, again, thank the musicians for being so flexible and accommodating with, you know, me calling up and, you know, saying, how about this recital in 3 weeks, you know, or a month? And will this work? Will this location work? Like, can, you know, who's playing with whom, and answering all these questions and just being so gracious with their flexibility to all of us.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and I was thinking about when you were talking about the long term and having that in our minds, one of the things that I'm glad that we also have as an organization is we have these imperatives that we agreed on a couple of years ago these were our imperatives and things that we wanted to accomplish over the next 5 years. And one of those is double our footprint. And so it was funny when we had to stop the concerts. I thought, well, good grief, how are we ever going to double our footprint? But then with the Bedtime with Bach, over like 220,000 views. People have watched that from all across the world. So, and through the streaming, we're working on building new bridges and connections so that we can stream to more people. So actually, this has helped us with that imperative to double the footprint. Another one was we want to expand, or we really want the symphony to represent Arkansas, like the demographics of Arkansas. And so we've worked hard. We've made it's important to us to have more diversity on stage with our guest artists, with excellence. Like, it's much more important to us to make sure that we're serving all of Arkansas. So we think about that even in the short term and long term. That's there. Another imperative is financial stability, which we're definitely watching. We may not have a budget, but we've got a cash flow estimate for every single month. And another one that's real important to us, it's an imperative for Arkansas Symphony, is our culture of team. This is one that is real important to this organization, and we can definitely say that this pandemic has brought out that culture of team. Again, the board, you know, increased their support. The musicians, the staff has stepped up, is there whenever and however we can be. We're all doing everything we can to make sure that we're serving the community and serving each other too. I think that's a big piece of it as well, serving each other. So whatever Drew needs, we're there. Like, and so that's a real critical imperative to this organization. So, but it makes it easier that we did that a couple of years ago, because now we can go, okay, everything we're doing, even if it's chaos or 3 years down the road, still has to work on those imperatives. And so far, thankfully, we have. But I'm very thankful to be here and be here and be in that culture.
I mean, I think, you know, I've thought many times over the last few months about what skills are we going to take out of this episode with the pandemic that will apply in the future. And there will be a future, and we will be in the concert hall again, and we will have, you know, large orchestras.
And Gil Shaham.
And Gil Shaham, yes. And what, you know, what are we going to take out of this, though? And I think that the way we've communicated with each other, learned how to communicate with each other in new ways, has actually really helped. And I feel better connected to different parts of the organization than I ever have. And hopefully I'm not the only one who feels that way. And you know, it's easier than ever before to just over communicate. We talk a lot about over communicating in this sort of situation, and you know, we're still always trying to get better at it as well, and to continue to grow on that front. But I think I agree that our ability to work as a team is something that has grown, and will continue to see positive benefits from that as we go along. We have a question from Jason, who asks, are you in need of volunteers for anything? I've been concerned that some who might normally volunteer would feel uncomfortable during the pandemic. And that's an interesting question. And you might have some thoughts on that, Christina. You know, of course, we don't have our normal force of volunteers who help at concerts, who, you know, belong to the guild, who are doing all manner of things for us. This would be a great time to give a shout out to our wonderful parent volunteers within the youth orchestra program, who are still working, you know, all over the computer now to keep our kids informed of our programs and as we get underway. So we certainly have parent volunteers in our education programs. But what do you think?
A couple things come to mind. One, we do normally have volunteer ushers, but obviously we don't have concerts. But as we think about going back into Robinson, we will need to think about how that works in terms of how that might work for ushers or not ushers. The other thing I've been asking people to help us with is calling and checking on people. I can't actually, it's hard. We would normally see a lot of people at a concert, or we would normally see them might normally see them at church, or I would normally run into our subscribers or our board members or the guild members or Sharp members. And so one of the things I've asked is if people can help just call and check on people and see how they're doing, and just let them know about what the symphony's doing, but also calling and checking on them. So there's some people that I just haven't seen and I'm worried about, and there's only so many people I can call. And so anyway, so that is one of the things I think about with volunteers is somebody just help call and check on people. Sure.
And it would be easy to get in touch if that were something you're interested in. You know, get in touch with any of us. We're all easy to track down, and we could, you know, direct you to the appropriate people who are organizing that. So, yeah, just call the box office 666-1761 extension 1, and we'd love to hear from you, and happy to talk to people who are interested in volunteering. So appreciate that. Thoughts?
Yes, thank you for that question.
So we are now. We're not. It's like the story of our lives. We're obviously not currently in the Robinson Center. We would love to be. We are looking at trying to get into the Robinson Center as early as sometime this fall. It's still being discussed. Of course, the Robinson Center is not. We do not own the Robinson Center, so so we're in a position where we have to play as an organization to our strengths. Well, what are our resources? What do we have when we're trying to put on events? And what we have is our incredible staff and our full-time core of musicians who are, you know, on the payroll, ready to play, and of course our contracted for service musicians who are also available, who we're trying to get opportunities for, and so that's, you know, so we're like, and we have our offices. We have Burn Hall, which is a very modest space that gets a whole lot of, you know, has historically gotten an incredible amount of use for the space that it is, and it's just, you know, amazes me when I go any day of the week, anytime, and it's like lessons, rehearsals, meetings, you know, all sorts of things happening. So we had that space, which we talked about earlier, where we've made into our little streaming studio. And so we've really focused on these very small concerts for right now, and, you know, without audiences, because we need people to stay safe. And but we will be looking at getting in Robinson as early as January for a reimagined Masterworks series. And so as I think, we've known, or maybe I'll let Christina sort of explain the gist of what that transition from our plan A to our plan B starting in January means for us.
Okay. All right. And okay, I do want to field that, but there's a question here about how people find out about online performances, and is there a charge? The Brandon has changed our website, so it's nice. It's on a calendar. So there's a calendar on our website, and you can see the different activities. It's about 3 activities a week that are happening. And is there a charge? The answer to that is no. Again, one of our goals is to be accessible, double our footprint, and serve. And so there's not a charge. There is, I think, a button where you can donate if you would like. So there is definitely the possibility for you to contribute to the symphony, but there is not a charge for those. Yes, we want to be accessible. And then, okay, Jeff, now I got to tackle your question, don't I?
Sorry, I didn't mean to punt. I just felt like I'd been talking for a really long time. And
okay. Gosh, okay, so the other thing that we like to do around here, if at all humanly possible, we believe in testing. So is there a way to do a small test? So we'd like to be in the concert hall for January for our Masterworks, even if that is, and I mean, these concerts that can be reimagined, they're beautiful programs for 20. There's some gorgeous repertoire for chamber orchestra size, chamber orchestras. And so there's some beautiful music that we've never been able to perform, because normally on stage we would want to perform Tchaikovsky Symphony No. 5 or Symphony Fantastique. But this gives us an opportunity to play some repertoire that's not been played at Robinson. So it'll be smaller, but and the audience will most likely we'll follow the guidelines, but assuming right now it's socially distanced, Robinson only holds about 400 people socially distanced. And so there's that. But sorry, as we think about it, the other thing we want to do though is we need to test. So it's possible. What our goal is to do like maybe a string quartet or a River Rhapsody, something smaller that we can just test before we go straight into a Masterworks concert in January. So we'll probably do something a little bit smaller in December. Maybe, I know what Jeff and I would really like to do is some kind of Christmas cheer that's smaller, and something that's like a general admission. I'm not exactly sure, but I know both of us really want to have something to do for Christmas. So we'll probably do something like that to test it and make sure that we've got the kinks worked out before we put a Masterworks concert on in January. And so that's what we're thinking of. We still, again, we want beautiful music, but we do want to make sure that we'd like to be able to test all the bugs out before we do a Masterworks concert. And we'll stream those as well. Like, again, those concerts will be live streamed, and then we'll also probably open up the open dress rehearsal if people want to come in when it's even fewer people in the concert hall. So we're looking at every way we can to make those accessible to our Masterworks subscribers.
We'll be streaming everything all year long, right? Yeah. Because of course it only makes sense to stay accessible. We completely realize that not only is there not safe capacity, but there's just also no reason to even think that everyone is going to be in a position where they can come out and come down to the hall, and we would never pressure anyone, orchestra or audience, to do that. So everything will be streamed. And sort of on that note, part of the reason we need a trial run at Robinson is the extent of the protocols that we need to try out backstage in order to keep our players safe, or our
staff safe.
I mean, there's pages and pages of new procedures that we have to go through, everything from, the standard sort of testing and temperature checks and that sort of thing, but also just rerouting traffic. Like, you think of all of us who've been playing orchestra for our entire lives, and we do the exact same thing. We go in, we put our case, on a table next to, next to someone, and then we go out on stage and we warm up, or some people warm up backstage or in the, loading dock, and it's people catch up with each other at the water cooler. I mean, it's this it's a lifetime of habits and instincts that needs to be completely revamped in order to put on a concert. And so it's going to take a lot of, that's why, our scenario planning group continues to meet every single week to talk about this stuff. So when we do have the chance to do it, we can do it in the safest way possible for everyone. And to Christina's point, I agree that, coming to a Masterworks concert where there are 10, 15, maybe 20 people on stage will obviously be quite different. But the great masters and the great contemporary composers who we feature all have music for this size ensemble. And it's not something we get to perform all that often. And so you're gonna see works that many of which are famous, but just we don't really perform on Masterworks because it's not the right scale of orchestra. And I'm excited about about what that's going to look like.
I was just thinking about, to your point, a lot of the living composers have worked for smaller ensemble because they've written it while they were at Juilliard or Eastern or wherever, and they're writing music for their 10 buddies to play on stage. So there's a lot of repertoire by living composers for smaller ensembles because they can't afford to hire a big orchestra.
Exactly. Yeah. And the same was kind of true. So of course you have classical music, there's Mozart, Haydn-sized orchestras, and often when we think of chamber orchestra, we think of, the year 1760 to 1801, and that's it. But that's actually not true. There was all the way through, composers have written chamber orchestra literature, but there was an explosion of it in the early 20th century after World War I, which was another time in history when resources were extremely scarce. Wasn't there a pandemic then too? A lot of composers wrote a vast array of great music in the 19 teens, 20s, 30s as well that we're going to be exploring. And as you mentioned, the wealth of chamber orchestra repertoire from contemporary composers is vast. So it's going to be, we're working on those concerts now, settling on what our final guidelines will be for how many people can be on stage. And meanwhile, on a month-to-month basis, putting out our plans for this fall. Next month is ready, so it'll be announced very, very soon. So yeah, stay tuned. The performances, just to reiterate, all the performances are arkansasymphony.org/virtual. There's also a button right on the main page, virtual performances, Facebook, Arkansas Symphony, Instagram, Twitter, arkansasymphony.org/fall events. We're trying to get it out there any way that we can. Definitely, if you want, on a weekly basis to find out what's happening in your email inbox and you're not on our email list, definitely get on that. And in our marketing department, send out very informative emails that I read myself to review.
I do too. I'm like, oh. And then it also shows what news articles we might have been in.
Yeah.
Jeff, I wanted to pivot 1 second.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell this personal story, but I'm going to say that I'm so glad that we're still doing the music education programs and that you guys have figured out how to do the youth orchestras. Yesterday, so my daughter is going to school virtually, which is hard because she's an extrovert, but that's what she wanted to do. And but she was having a really hard time. She hadn't seen her friends, and it was just kind of a meltdown moment for a 9th grader. And she asked me, she said, Mom, she said, can I go do this virtual marching band practice? Can you take me to in-person? She's like, can you take me to Central High School so I can do this in-person marching band practice? And I was like, absolutely. And so after she got to do that, everything was so much better because she got to see people and she got to play her trombone and she got to make music. And I just think, gosh, I'm so glad that these kids, including my own daughter, have music as an opportunity because right now that music is helping her connect to people and to bigger things and also her own spirit and her own, reminder of inspiration, of hope. So I'm so glad you still have the youth orchestra. I'm glad that we're keeping that going, because I'm like, gosh, if she didn't have the trombone, we wouldn't have been able to have that one moment where she could go do something.
It's a great point. I'm glad you shared that, because it's you know, talking to these kids every week, whether it's my students or just students in the youth orchestra, or talking to other teachers about students, you know, this is, of course, really hard, inexplicable, you know, why, and in these incredibly formative moments for the students. And, you know, while it's not the same, like, you know, your daughter Jubilee needed to go see people, needed to go to band practice, and you know, I think that students, whether they're doing everything virtual school wise or not, I mean, they have to have something. But having an array of the activities, being able to keep up the music, and I'll give an example of one of the things that we're doing to try and keep students connected to each other, is Zoom practicing. And so, you know, we're teachers, we're always trying to get our students to practice. And so, but practicing is kind of a lonely activity, you know, and part of the reason that, you know, one of the great difficulties in being an orchestral musician is like all that time you spend alone practicing. And then, you know, it's just very much part of being a classical musician. And so, so what's been happening ever since this started with the summer program of the Sturgis Music Academy that Catherine Williamson runs, and the Zoom practice room is a place where everyone can log in, you know, hit mute on their computer, and everyone just kind of practices together. And they sort of take breaks together, maybe pause for conversation, go out in a breakout room and discuss something if you need to, but more or less, you know, kind of hold each other accountable, and also just see some familiar faces. And it's been a huge success. We've been doing it ever since, and Drew hosts one almost every morning, and I get on there and practice for you know, as much time as I can first thing in the morning, and see other ASO musicians on there and see our students. And so that's just an example, you know, of how we're keeping the kids connected. But, you know, also on a personal note, I was just talking to my sister on the phone the other day, who has, my niece and nephew are 9 and 5, and they started school in person. This is up in State College, Pennsylvania. But they, you know, as soon as the college kids came back, the school district went all virtual. So now my niece is doing virtual kindergarten, and my nephew is, you know, third or fourth grade, and I don't know why I'm blanking, but they're both playing baseball. And that has been, she was saying how important that's been for them, just to have the chance to have a little interaction, and, you know, do something a little bit different. And so that's what we're working towards. And apparently they play really serious Little League baseball in central Pennsylvania, in case you didn't know. But of course, they're about an hour from where the Little League World Series happens. So,
right.
but yeah, that's real baseball country.
Yeah. We have, we're running close to our end time. We have about 9 minutes left.
Yeah.
There's something that I haven't asked you, or something we haven't talked about that you think is important to get out?
You know, hopefully this was a chance to kind of see what we've been thinking all this time, and kind of the method behind, I'm sure, what seemed like all over the place kind of rescheduling. And of course, we've all been forced to scramble, but I think that, you know, this is how our messaging has evolved, and definitely encouraging people to check out our fall programming. I want everyone to know that we're here, and as you said, remain committed to keeping the staff and the full-time musicians employed, to providing additional opportunities for the rest of our musicians, to serving the community. And thank you, and thanks to the generous support of the community, we're in the position to do that for the foreseeable future, wouldn't you say?
Foreseeable future. And I I should mention that Opus Ball is also going to go online. And so our chairs for Opus Ball are Martin and Melissa Toma, and they have managed to pivot to a virtual program. So it'll be November 7th. But I would like to send a thank you to everyone that sponsored Opus and was fine supporting the symphony, even if they can't go to Opus Ball this year. The way we'll do Opus is we will have breakout groups, and I think Chris Allen is going to be our headliner for Opus, because he is American Idol winner, and then he also he also participated in the Arkansas Symphony Youth Orchestra. So Opus supports our music education programs, and so it's because of Opus that, I like to say it's because Chris Allen was an Arkansas Symphony Youth Orchestra member that he became an American Idol winner. I think we should just claim him. So, but it's been interesting, and I really did appreciate how you seemed like we are making decisions helter-skelter. I like how you used it in the past tense. I feel like we're still making these decisions. Yeah, going, oh gosh, because I think about Opus like, okay, so we have this. We've never tried to do Opus Ball virtually before, and obviously it'll be shorter than the real ball, but we'll have a dance combo at the end, and so anyway, we're still figuring things out and predicting things the best we possibly can, but all to make sure that the symphony and our music education programs are here when this pandemic's over and financially stable. It'd be easy enough to not be stable, but we want to be stable so that we can continue for the next 54 years. So thank you to our donors to the Opus Ball as well.
Yeah, we did just get a question. Can we see Opus auction items yet? So I believe not yet, but I think it's coming soon. So we'll definitely have that info available. Shoot one of us an email, and we'll get that answer for you.
Yeah, I think that's under construction. I think that webpage is under construction, but it should be very soon. Opus is November 7th. Anyway, so it should be coming soon, the auction items.
Yeah, definitely. So, and in terms of anything else, I mean, I think that just stay tuned, stick with us, and I think that overall, I think the state of the symphony is about as good as it could be under the circumstances. And, can't say enough times how grateful I am for everybody's incredible support and for having so many fabulous musician colleagues, and staff colleagues and board member colleagues, and, great students. And it's just really, kind of brings it all full circle to what Mayor Scott said at the beginning. We feel like we're part of the community, and we're going to continue to try and serve the community, and we're going to put on concerts. I promise we're going to put on concerts. So, we're simultaneously, just to recap, we're simultaneously working on next month, we're winter and spring, the second half of this season, which is going to be quite different, and also next season as well, which is falling into place. We've rescheduled a lot, and we're going to be moving ahead full steam.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
that was beautiful, and I'll just tack on. I just feel thankful to go for a full circle again. I feel thankful that we get to represent Little Rock and Arkansas, to here and to the rest of the world. So we like being proud. We are proud ambassadors of our city and our state.
Yes. And we'll be doing this again. We're maybe different panelists, but we'll be having these brown bag lunches monthly. If this is your first one, this particular virtual event grew out of something we do normally in person at Byrne Hall. When we have a guest conductor or particular guest artists, we'll invite them to Byrne Hall at lunchtime, and they give do a kind of question and answer, and our patrons can come and sort of see how they work and meet them and hear their voice, and they're always very well attended and nice nice events. So that was one of the things I thought, well, we could take that virtual. So, you know, so I've really enjoyed being with everyone and with chatting with you, Christina, today.
Yeah,
So
Jim.
thank you for,
And thank you all for watching.
so if there's not any other questions, which I think we're done, thank you all for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day, and check out our virtual performances, lectures, open rehearsals, educational events that are all going to be streaming on all of our services. It's a very integrated approach to bringing music to the community through this fall, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the next event. Take care.
Thank you.